Hey viewers, my name's Cara. This week's video topic is actually a suggestion from one of my Patreon sponsors, Jenny. I had asked for suggestions about kind of simple, basic type things that my patrons think would be helpful to put out there, maybe something that I haven't talked about before or haven't talked about in a while that might be helpful for people in the community, maybe people who are just finding their path in paganism, modern witchcraft, this kind of area. And so the suggestion was to talk about ways to bring your witchcraft into your daily life. Examples being such things as doing daily draws if you read cards, or incorporating magic into your daily cup of tea, or cooking your meals, and things like that. So taking that as a place to start, I have put together a little list for myself of bullet points, things that I can talk to you about today, as far as bringing our craft, bringing our practice into an everyday sort of occurrence where we're really blending it in our lives overall, and it's not just becoming, or not just staying, a thing that we keep sort of separate off to one side. And there's there's our life, and we might call it our mundane life, and then there's our magic stuff, but bringing that magic into the everyday. Definitely something I can talk about. The first example, however, daily draws and things like that. I've talked about this before. You have definitely heard me say, if you've watched my videos for any number of years, or I think we also talked about this sometime this past year on the Pagan Perspective collab channel, for which I am the Tuesday regular full-time host. So I make videos there every Tuesday except for the last week of the month, which is subs week, and the substitute hosts fill in. But anyway, I feel like we've talked about sort of daily things or things that we do regularly somewhat recently. Or we were talking about how often people practice, and if you have to practice at a certain frequency, or what practice even means, but if you have to be doing certain things at a specific frequency in order to be valid, or, a real part of the community or whatever. So I talked about how I don't do a lot of things on a daily basis, but in thinking about it for this topic, I realized, of course, there are things that I do. They're just not necessarily things that we might think of, such as the first example being daily draws. So I do read cards, and this is also something. I have the Halloween Oracle by Stacey DeMarco here with me today, but this is something that I find to be a big assumption that people make as well. Not everyone within the neo-pagan or modern witchcraft community is a card reader of any kind. I happen to read tarot and oracle, and it is something that I grew up with being part of my life because my mother, although she is not a witch, was a tarot reader. So this is one of those things where cartomancy, or divination using cards of any sort, is a practice that some people do. Some witches do it, not all witches do it, and not all people who read tarot cards are witches or pagans of any sort. So I do find that it tends to be kind of an assumption, or like a stereotype, that if you're a witch, you must also read cards. And just a little word to the wise, that's not always the case, although a lot of us do. It's something that I started learning very early on, but I read oracle cards first. I didn't move on to tarot for quite some time, and now I read both. But of course, I have my specific decks that I like. It doesn't mean that we can read every single deck or every system. So as far as daily draws, it's definitely something you can do. I employ daily draws at certain times throughout my life, but it's not something I do every single day, 365, 366 days of the year. Just not something I do. When I do daily draws, it's typically because I have a new deck that I'm trying to get to know. So I got this deck last year, and for quite a while afterwards, I was doing daily draws with it. It's a way to familiarize myself with a new deck, or if there are certain times where I'm just feeling like, I might like to get a little extra guidance from my cards for a while, I will actually leave one or more of my decks out since it is autumn in the Northern Hemisphere right now, on my blog, I have my autumn quarter tarot and oracle readings offerings listed. So this is one of the decks that I'm currently working with for this quarter. So I've been leaving out the 3 decks that I'm using for the quarter that I'm offering for paid readings online, so that they're always kind of in my everyday. So even if I'm not doing a reading for someone else that day, it's nearby, and when I see it, I might shuffle real quick and draw myself a card. So it's not something that I do all the time, but for me, I'm definitely one of those people that benefits from having the thing out so that I can see it, and that sort of reminds me to get into it. So it's not something that everyone is interested in doing, and again, not everyone even uses cards. So that's definitely something that, if you are a card reader, something you can do is draw a card every day, and whether it's to gain insight for yourself or just to help you learn and familiarize yourself with your decks, that's something that I do recommend if that's something you're interested in, part of your practice. But again, it's not something I necessarily do every single day. The next thing that Jenny mentioned is tea. And tea is definitely something that I engage with every day for 3/4 of the year. I don't really drink hot tea throughout the summer. That's pretty much the only time that I'm not making myself at least one daily cup of tea. So that's definitely an area that I get into. And cooking as well, these kind of go hand in hand, the things that I'm going to say about them. So tea and cooking, first thing that comes to mind for me is herbalism. If you are interested in herbalism, learning to use plants for their magical and or medicinal or just their culinary properties, then this is an area where those interests really come to the forefront. So if you are a tea lover like me, I used to work at a Victorian style tea parlor, which is not where my love of tea began, but is a place where I was able to learn more about teas and experience them even more in depth. We worked with all loose leaf teas, and that was sort of the first time in my life that I did that, other than growing some of my own plants that I make my own loose leaf teas out of. But I was exposed to so many more different types of tea when I was working at this tea parlor, and it just made me love it even more. And so I've learned a lot of things that I continue to bring to my home tea practice, if you will. But yeah, so on a very basic level, I enjoy tea as a beverage. I tend to run cold. I am one of those people that has more of a cold countenance about them. I tend to always be colder than everyone else, rather, regardless of what the actual temperature is around me. So I love when it is warmer, and so I like hot tea. Using it to warm my hands at the moment because this is actually one of the cooler days that we've had so far. But even beyond that, beyond just going to my tea cabinet and saying, okay, what sort of tea do I want today, which you can do intuitively or by taste, what do I have a taste for today? But also, if you're interested in herbalism, learning about the different properties of the plants and herbs that might be in your tea, or the different types of teas, and learning the different effects that they have on you, so that when you go to your tea cabinet, you can think, okay, how am I feeling today? What's going on in my life today? What do I want to get from my cup of tea? So like today, I'm drinking a honeydew green tea because I wanted something kind of sweet and light. I get more flavor out of this by adding agave nectar. A little bit of sweetness brings out those more hidden flavors, which is a trick that I learned when working at the tea parlor. But other days, I might want a really rich, dark, black tea. And some days I might want no caffeine, so I might go for a rooibos or an herbal blend that has no tea leaf in it whatsoever. Things like that. So that's just sort of the knowing what's in your tea cabinet aspect of it. If I'm not feeling well, if I'm not feeling well, If I'm feeling like maybe I'm getting a cold or something like that, I like to use green tea and white tea blended. All tea has a little bit of antioxidants, and I'm not an expert in this whatsoever, but just through research that I've done over the years, all tea has various amounts of antioxidant properties, but green and white are thought to have more. So whenever I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, I feel like it's just a little cold coming on, usually like a seasonal thing, I will make myself a blend of green and white tea. That is a tradition that I started for myself when I was working at the tea parlor. I would do half and half of either a plain green tea or one of our mint green teas. Mint is very stimulating as well and helps clear my sinuses. That's just something that I know about how that plant affects me. And one of our plain white teas, or sometimes a white tea with a little rose petal in it, and I would mix those half and half, and I always felt better. So that's just a tradition that I've started for myself based on learning how each of those teas that I was working with affected my body. So to me, that's part of herbalism, and that translates also into cooking, because I'm not a trained cook in any sense. Not even really my family ever taught me how to cook many things. I've mostly learned by looking up easy recipes online, adapting them to what I have, and then doing things intuitively. So I'm the kind of person who goes to cook something, and then when it's time to season it, I look at the spice cabinet and I just kind of think or say to it, okay, who wants to go in this meal today? And then I grab the things that sort of draw me to them. And I don't necessarily know all of the innate properties of the different things that I'm using, but I know that spices are warming, and I know that certain tastes go well together. I know that we like to have a little bit of a citrus flavor in our spaghetti sauce that we make with chickpeas and tomato. So I like to use a little lemon balm or something like that, and that goes well with oregano. I have made mashed potatoes flavored with lavender, which is something that I really love to do. It's just something that I kind of did one day, or maybe I saw it in a recipe and thought it sounded cool because I love lavender. And I started doing that, and people always think it's really novel and unique, so I make it for people sometimes, and it just sort of adds another calming, soothing layer to that comfort food aspect of mashed potatoes for me. So yeah, just exploring things like that, all to do with herbs, if you are, or spices, herbs and spices, plants in general that you would use for culinary purposes. If you are someone who already loves to work in the kitchen, loves to cook, bake, loves tea, anything like that. I also have various mugs that are very magical to me. I got this mug in Lilydale, New York, the first time I was visiting Lilydale, so this reminds me of that trip, as well as, of course, has the sun and the moon, which symbolically are important to me. So just bringing in all those little influences. I have a mug from Pentacles of Pride. I have various mugs that are witchy or Halloween themed, which I love. And actually a couple of them I have here to show you, because another thing you can do with tea beyond just the herbalism aspect and using those magical and or medicinal properties for what you would like to do that day. What is your intention for this cup of tea? Is it to wake me up, or is it to relax me before bed? Very different cups of tea, right? In addition to that, you can also use tea for different aspects of magic itself, such as you can use magic for scrying, and you may love to use one of these beautiful big mugs that are popular now, and black mugs are also becoming more available now, I think, than I have ever seen before. Maybe they've always been pretty common, but they're not something that I've always had. So I got this one a few years ago when these were very popular, and it's huge, and it happens to already be black. So you can even use this with just water in it for scrying, and you can also use any different type of tea. So you can choose a tea that has properties related to what you want to scry for, or the purpose of your divination that day. I also have this other smaller one that I found actually at my local thrift store earlier this year or last year, like in the middle of spring. I think it was spring this year. So that was just kind of something that I happened across that was out of season, and it has a black inside, so also very good for scrying, which is just the basic practice of using reflective surfaces, whether it be a black mirror or a shiny surface of a crystal or a crystal ball or other gazing ball or water in any type of vessel. And I could, if I wanted to, just use my green tea, even though it's a white inside of the mug and the tea is green. It doesn't have to be any specific color. So that's something that you can practice regardless. But if you have black vessels, that could just be even more helpful to you. And another thing you can do with your beverages or food is actually charge it with your intention. So this is something that I had always been vaguely aware of for a long time. I don't remember where I learned it, if I read it a long time ago or if someone taught it to me a long time ago, but this is something that I was always kind of aware of. And when I went to witch camp in 2015, this is an activity that the teachers actually had us do as part of the Elements of Magic path. This was part of, I think it was fire, on the fire day, because we were talking about energetic work, and charging things with energy is related to fire. But then we might have also talked about it for water. I think it was fire though, because it's energetic related. So just like you would charge any other type of item, you can charge your beverage or your meal with your intention. And then as you drink it, visualize whatever energy you have charged it with entering your body. So it's just another way of doing some energetic magic. So that's a great one if you didn't know about that before. Oh, one more thing with cooking. I'm looking over at my list there. One more thing with cooking is if you happen to have recipes that belonged to people in your family or friends, anything that people have handed down to you, that can be a great thing to incorporate if you do any sort of ancestor work. So we're getting into Samhain season here in the Northern Hemisphere, when a lot of people may be doing more ancestor work than they might the rest of the year. I today have also been preparing to make a recipe tomorrow that is not from my family, but it reminded me because I have a recipe box that belonged to my grandmother. And when she passed away this past year, my mom was here, and my mom and I went through, I had my mom's recipe box, and then when my grandmother passed away, my mom took back her recipe box and gave me my grandmother's old metal, very vintage looking recipe box. And we went through and made copies of things that multiple people wanted, decided, oh, I'll take this and you take this. I gave my mom a lot of the recipes that I could not foresee myself using or being able to make vegan in any way. And I kept a lot of the things that are very simple to veganize. And so that just reminded me that cooking could also be something that ties you to your ancestors or your culture or friendships. There's literally a recipe in my grandma's recipe box for something called friendship tea, I think. And yeah, so I just think that's really cool as well. If that applies to you, that could be somewhere else that you look in terms of cooking or baking or kitchen witchery. Beyond that, thinking about what I do in my everyday life that brings in my magic. If I don't do things like daily card draws, then what am I doing? And so I was thinking well, I love incense, and I like to burn incense a lot, not necessarily on an everyday basis, but it is something that I do pretty regularly. Whenever I am doing something more formally with my magic, I love to have incense incorporated in that. But also sometimes if I'm just practicing with my cards, or if I'm sitting and meditating, or if I'm reading a book that is teaching me something about my spiritual path, I might also like to light a stick of incense, which to me is another sort of unconscious clue that, well, I'm consciously making the decision to use it, but it is triggering an unconscious association for me that this thing that I'm doing now is sacred. Like, this is an important and special thing because I'm lighting incense. And so the act of doing that is a way that I bring my craft into more everyday things, but also the incense that I choose, because, and this is somewhat related to herbalism as well, but it has to do for me with choosing the different scents based on what sort of effect that scent has on me and the environment. So am I doing something where I want to be more energized? Then I might choose, I have a fire cinnamon incense that is just like really bright spice and very energetic to me. So I might go for something like that. If I'm doing something more relaxing, I want to have a more soothing vibe going on, I might go for something like a vanilla or a rose or a flower scent. I have a lot of floral incense scents, and anything in between. If I want something a little bit lighter and cleaner, more of a subtle scent, I have one that is actually like a green tea. So things like that. So depending on what you already have, what you already use, there are ways to think about those as magical associations and choose those things with intention. Similarly, crystals. If crystals are something that you use, which again, not everyone does, if crystals are something that you already use or are interested in, you can choose a crystal to work with every day or at different points in the day. Or you can have crystals all over your house like I do, because I just have them everywhere. But when I used to work at that tea parlor or any other of my previous day jobs, there would be a lot of mornings where I was getting ready and I would choose my jewelry based on maybe the crystals that was in the necklace or the rings or the bracelets that I was wearing, and what sort of energy did I want to bring with me to work that day. So I remember at one point in my job history, I was having a lot of problems with very negative people that I had to interact with on a daily basis during my job. And during that time, I would carry with me a piece of labradorite because it is an iridescent stone. It has that very characteristic flash to it. If you've seen that before, you know what I'm talking about. Similar to like an opal or what they call rainbow moonstone, which isn't actually a moonstone. It's actually a labradorite, but they have those flashes that kind of like mirror the light. They reflect the light away from them in kind of a rainbow hue. So any type of stone like that has that physical property, we can use magically, energetically, for reflecting energy away from us. Similarly to how you might use a mirror in magic, a mirror facing away from you to bounce off negative energies like a shield. You can also use energetic shielding, of course, which is something else that I do. But to me, like choosing the little labradorite stone to actually bring with me to work every day, that was just another part of me setting my intention that I was going to protect myself and not let negative energy mess up my day. So if you work with crystals, that is another way that you can incorporate them daily. The next thing might sound even more mundane, and that's great because I think that's the whole point. So taking a shower. Every time you take a shower or wash your hands, wash your face, brush your teeth, anything like that, that can be taken and turned into an opportunity for spiritual and energetic cleansing as well as physical cleansing. So I know every time I take a shower, at least for a minute of that time, I am spending some time consciously imagining the water cleansing my energy field as well as my physical body. And you can come up with a little rhyme in your head that you like to say that's your little cleansing spell. You can sing a little song that to you is about cleansing. There are many chants and songs about the cleansing properties of water. So like yesterday when I took a shower, I was actually chanting to myself, born of water, cleansing, powerful, healing, changing, we are. I love singing in the shower, and that is a really simple chant that has to do with the magical properties of water. So that's a really good one that you can use. Anything. I love making up little songs for different things. So yeah, taking any opportunity that you have for something like that where you are actively engaging with an element. Water just happens to be a really common one because we're always showering, bathing, washing our face, washing our hands, whatever. If you remember to take every one of those opportunities and make it into something that you can do energetically and magically as well, then you'll find those moments all throughout your day, all the time. And it won't even be something that you have to have a specific item, or you don't have to have crystals or incense or anything to do that. That can just be part of your life. So there's that. And then along those same lines, there is cleaning up. So when I think of washing my hands, I also think of washing the dishes. If you are like me and you really dislike certain household chores like hand washing dishes, then I can tell you from experience that it helps to contextualize those things as communing with the element of water, or as service to the divine or to the universe. Like if you are concentrating while washing the dishes on the element of water and cleansing and, charging that water that you're cleaning with the same sort of energetic cleansing and, protecting or abundance or whatever it is, energy, if you're charging that onto your dishes and plates and silverware as you're washing them, and this doesn't really apply if you have a dishwasher, but if you're like me and often are doing it hands-on, then that is just another step of adding that magic before you even get to the cooking part, where you're then cooking a meal and putting those magical herbs in and putting that magical energy in. All of your dishes and things are already charged with that energy. Or if you just look at it in terms of if you are dedicated to a specific deity or work with a specific deity or not, if it's just the universe, whatever it is, but you're thinking of those little things that you do every day as a form of service to them, as a form of service to life, to the people you love, whose day you make easier by doing that chore so that they don't have to. I can tell you it helps. It makes me feel a different sense of purpose. It makes me dislike what I'm doing a lot less. We'll say that. It doesn't work every day. I still don't want to do it every single day, but it definitely helps me. Another thing that I really get into around here, around the house, is gardening. So something that I've been doing a lot since last year, but also a lot more this year since my partner and I moved into this new house, is going around the little yard that we have where previous owners have already planted a lot of different plants, shrubs, trees, and also the things that are already growing wild here, and trying to identify them so that I'm really becoming familiar with the plant life that lives here, that has lived here before I got here, and learning those properties and seeing, what can I harvest and use in my teas so that I'm bringing the energy of the land that I'm living on currently into my everyday, into my tea magic, and, seeing how I can deepen that relationship. So that's something that I've been really big into. I won't go too much more into it in this video because it will take even longer, but that is just something that I enjoy because I do enjoy gardening. I enjoy plants, and so that's a big thing that I've been doing, as well as growing my own herbs and some vegetables and things. We are planning on a bigger garden situation, but didn't get around to it this year. So a lot of my plants are inside. One of them is there. But I have a lot of seedlings and sprouts and small plants just everywhere on my little porch here. But yeah, something that's really been important to me over the past couple of years is learning what these plants are that I share my life with every day, and taking care of them and seeing how they may also take care of me in return. So that's something that I love. And, things like meditating is something that you can incorporate into any aspect of your day. I think it's important to remember that meditation does not just mean sitting still and being quiet. You can meditate in the shower. You can meditate while you're washing those dishes by hand. You can meditate while taking a walk around your yard or down your street or, whatever. In the Elements of Magic book, when I did my review video of that a little while back, earlier this year, I mentioned that there's a part in the spirit section of that book, the spirit chapter. There was a section written by Dawn Isadora in which they talk about their 5-point spiritual practice, which was kind of the 5 things that they try to do every single day in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes they can overlap them and do 2 in the same activity, which even saves time, but just kind of 5 things that they try to keep in mind to develop their daily personal practice around. And they are something that I thought sounded really cool, and I will admit I have not yet successfully brought in all 5 of these into every day of my life, but I still think it's important. It's something that I'm still working on, something that I am willing to bring in more, and something that I've been keeping in mind ever since I read it. So the 5 things are gratitude, which I talked about last week here on this channel, energetic practice, some of which I talked about today, such as charging things energetically, or also taking time to energetically cleanse ourselves in the shower. Things like that are energetic practices. Grounding and centering is an energetic practice. Shielding is energy. So I think any of those would qualify. So gratitude, energetic practice. Inward gazing, which is another way that you might think of meditation as a form of inner gazing, especially if you're not doing it as a guided meditation or like a journey where you're specifically concentrating on something else. But inward gazing is more taking that time. Maybe it's when you're having your morning coffee or tea or whatever, whenever is convenient for you. Maybe it is during your shower. Maybe it's during your drive to work or your ride on the bus or whatever it is. Taking time to sit and be with yourself and do a little internal check-in. How am I feeling today? What's my energy like today? What have I been really preoccupied with? What am I excited for later today? And in the Elements of Magic book, in this section that I'm talking about, Dawn writes more explanations of what they mean by these things. But these are the things that come to mind for me right now. Just taking that time for gazing inward and checking in with yourself. That's kind of how I think of it, as just like check-ins. And then the last 2, so those are the 3. The last 2 are active practice and some stillness practice. So I just said meditation doesn't have to be always stillness, and that's true. You can take the time, during that morning cup of coffee when you're doing your inward gazing to also be physically still. That counts. And then that's 2 out of the 5 in the same activity. And you're having your morning coffee or whatever it is that you already do every single day. And then active practice totally depends on the person. It depends on your own ability, interest, and mobility in general. So for some people, it might mean a 5-minute dance break. For others, it might mean taking a walk, or when you're already out walking your dog or something like that. Or it might just mean taking a moment to stretch. If you're at your desk, stand up, walk around a little bit, stretch out your neck, whatever. It can be small things. And I know that even that much might be not possible for certain people based on their mobility. So Dawn does also say in the book that there are things that can be done with differing levels of mobility. And so it's something that it's whatever is active for the person in question. To me, when I was thinking about this after I did that Elements of Magic video, I was also thinking something that's really important for me might be getting outside, might be my interpretation of activity. So it might not mean going for a jog or dancing around. It might just be literally reminding myself, especially on my really bad days, my very low energy days, my slightly worse mental health days, it might just be that reminder to myself to get up, put down the book that I'm reading or whatever it is that I'm distracting myself with, like curled up, being still. I'm still a lot of the time. So stillness is not really a problem for me. stillness and quiet. But it might be getting up and getting outside, just that little bit of movement for that day. And then there are other days where I get up and it's so beautiful and sunny and warm outside that I just I can't stay inside at all. I immediately want to get outside, and then I'm gardening and I'm communing with the plants and the earth and everything like that. So it really just depends on the day for me. So whatever makes up your daily practice might also very much depend on the day, how much energy you have to give that day, and what else you've got on your agenda. So for me, it's less about going out and acquiring the items or going to the places where classes are being held. And I say this as someone who presents workshops and offers classes and things too. It's not really about that. It's not about going out and picking up new skills. So developing a daily practice is not about going and learning how to read tarot cards or buying a beginner set of crystals that you can start working with. If you already want to do those things, that's great, and you can absolutely incorporate them into your daily practice. If they're things that you already do, great. Find ways to bring them into your everyday life, for sure. But to me, bottom line, it's more about finding the things that you already do in your life that you would already be doing anyway and making them magical for you. Finding something about them that you can give it magical purpose and give it intention. Doing things just more intentionally, I think a lot of the time is what it is for me. Being more mindful with what we're doing, being more present with what we're doing, making decisions consciously, and hopefully having fun and enjoying ourselves while we do it. So that's what it is for me. This video is a bit longer than I even thought it would be, although I knew it would be long. So thank you so much if you have been here the whole time. If you had to watch this video in parts, I totally understand. Lives are busy. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else that you would recommend to people or ways that you bring your craft into your practice. Thank you, Jenny, for the suggestion. Links are in my video descriptions to things like my Patreon, where Jenny is one of my various supporters. If you love the videos that I do here on YouTube, you want to get some more behind the scenes exclusive content from me, you can click that link, go to patreon.com/cutewitch772 and pledge even $1 per month. And up from there, as you choose, there are different rewards and things that you can have access to, but everybody gets access to lots of behind-the-scenes exclusives and occasionally the opportunity to tell me what you'd like to see. Since my patrons are supporting this work that I make for the public that is freely available on YouTube for everybody, I definitely think it's important to me that I am not only doing what I want to do, because I always do have the final say, it's my channel, and it's my practice, and it's my life, but I do think it's important to me to ask my patrons, what kind of things do you want to see? What do you want to sponsor being out there in the world? What do you think would be helpful for the community? What would you be proud to say you helped support me financially so that I could live providing this content? So that's kind of where this video came from. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, all of you, for watching and or listening. Again, share whatever you'd like in the comments, and I will see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.